Friends, if you are ready to explore everything about the highly anticipated movie Lilo and Stitch in 2025, then you have come to the right place. This video is packed with all the details you need to know about this upcoming film. If you are visiting our channel for the very first time, do not forget to subscribe and stay connected with us for more exciting updates like this in the future. Today's video is going to take you on a complete journey of this film, from what the movie is all about to where you can watch it and all the fascinating details that surround it. Fans have been eagerly waiting for this live-action adaptation of a beloved classic, and now the wait is almost over. In this video, I will tell you which OTT platforms or satellite channels might release the movie, how soon you can expect it, and what kind of experience you will get when you finally watch it. We will also dive deep into the journey of its making, beginning with the early pre-production phase where everything started coming together. From the planning of the script, casting of the actors, and finalizing the locations, to the exciting filming phase where the magic was actually captured, and finally, to the post-production stage where the visuals, sound, and every small detail were polished to perfection. Along with this, we will talk about the music department, which plays a major role in bringing a story like Lilo and Stitch to life. The soundtrack has always been a memorable part of this story, and in this new version, it is expected to create an even deeper emotional connection with audiences. This video will also reveal details about the film's estimated budget, what the creators have invested to make it special, and the expected box office performance once it releases. You will also get to know about the talented cast that has stepped into these iconic roles. We will discuss how each actor has portrayed their character, what challenges they faced during filming, and how their performances will make this version stand out. Of course, we will not forget the beloved characters at the heart of this story: Lilo, Stitch, and the unforgettable bond they share. In addition to that, I will share a brief review of the story, giving you a glimpse of the plot without spoiling too much. We will also explore some interesting behind-the-scenes facts that fans would love to hear, things about how certain scenes were made, the creative decisions taken during production, and how this movie connects with both older fans and a new generation of viewers. So my friends, make sure to watch this video till the very end, because what we have prepared for you is more than just basic details. It is a complete insight into the world of Lilo and Stitch in 2025, a film that promises to bring back memories, create new ones, and offer a unique cinematic experience. Let's start this journey together now. The story of Lilo and Stitch unfolds with a burst of energy, beginning in the far reaches of space where an experiment gone wrong creates a chaotic, unstoppable creature. This little ball of mischief, designed for destruction, manages to escape its intergalactic captors and crash lands on Earth, far from the stars and light years away from the structured world it came from. Its landing spot is a quiet Hawaiian island, where the real heart of the story begins. Here we meet a young girl who feels like an outcast in her own world, struggling to find her place after losing her parents, and her older sister who is doing everything she can to keep their fragile family together while fending off the ever-watchful social worker who seems ready to split them apart at the slightest mistake. This setup may look like a simple three-act adventure, but it dances between two perspectives: wild cosmic chaos and small-town heartache, creating a narrative that feels familiar yet playfully unpredictable. The first major turning point sparks when the girl adopts the creature, mistaking it for a dog at a local shelter, and names him with the kind of innocent imagination only a child can have. From that moment, their destinies intertwine, and the chaos becomes both comedic and touching. Daily routines turn into mini-disasters, hula classes are interrupted, surfboards become battlegrounds, and the social worker's patience wears thinner with every wild mishap. Yet within this chaos, the story plants seeds of connection, a bond that is more than owner and pet, more than friend and friend. It becomes a lifeline for two lonely souls who see a bit of themselves in each other. Midway through, the stakes tighten as the creature's true nature begins to surface. Pursued by his extraterrestrial creators and caught in a spiral of destruction, his presence threatens the family's already fragile stability. A heartbreaking chain of events leads to the possibility of the young girl being taken away from her sister, and the creature realizes for the first time that his actions have real consequences for those he cares about. One of the most powerful moments comes not with loud explosions but with quiet honesty, a bedtime story about a lost duck looking for its family, a simple gaze out over the ocean, and a shared sense of longing that transcends species. The final act takes off, literally, as the chaos escalates to a sky-high chase that mixes surfboards, spaceships, and improvised heroics. Here the creature faces the ultimate choice: return to the world he came from or fight for the one he has come to love. The climax balances zany, action-packed spectacle with very real emotional stakes, a signature that could separate sisters forever versus a promise made under a roof that might not stand tomorrow. By the end, The narrative stitches together its themes of belonging, identity, and chosen family. Every wild twist, every moment of slapstick destruction, and every tender pause leads to a conclusion where chaos finds its home, and broken pieces come together to form something whole. Characters here are not just players in a story. They are moving, breathing engines that push the film forward, each carrying a private weather system of fears, hopes, and flaws that collide in messy human ways. Lilo arrives as a small, fierce bundle of contradiction, funny and stubborn, painfully lonely but overflowing with an almost stubborn hope that someone will see her. Her arc is less about changing who she is and more about being seen and accepted for all the odd edges she brings. That need to be seen is what draws Stitch in and what makes their relationship electric. Stitch begins as a chaos machine, an engineered creature built to break things, and his transformation is written through the tiny, often comic moments where impulse meets intention. He learns that a choice can come from a feeling, not just programming. Watching him fumble with simple acts of care, holding a plate without crushing it, trying to mimic a lullaby, turns the spectacle of his physicality into a study of emerging conscience. Nanny's journey runs on quieter, tougher fuel. Her days are ledgered with responsibility, fear of failing as a guardian, and the practical exhaustion of trying to keep a household intact. Her toughness is not a fixed trait but a resource that gets tested and replenished. She grows into a version of strength that allows for help rather than denies it, and that shift reshapes the family's chances. The supporting cast is treated with more than one-note service. The social worker starts as an imposing rule enforcer but is sketched with small, believable soft spots that render his eventual decisions credible rather than convenient, while Jumba and Pleakley supply comic relief that also deepens the themes. Jumba wrestling with creator's remorse and Pleakley learning to translate alien bewilderment into genuine care. Antagonists are useful mirrors rather than mere obstacles. Their single-minded missions force Stitch and the family to define themselves in opposition to what they were made to be. Relationships drive the emotional geometry of the film. Lilo's insistence on Ohana teaches Stitch about belonging. Stitch's unpredictable loyalty forces Nanny to confront what family means beyond paperwork, and the group's collective missteps create a feedback loop where each character's failures become stepping stones for another's growth. Motivations are kept honest: survival, love, fear of loss, desire for recognition. Nothing feels manufactured. Scenes that could have been pure spectacle are often turned inward. A clumsy attempt at helping becomes a confession, a fight over a broken lamp becomes proof of commitment, and those micro-moments accumulate into a larger portrait of people learning new verbs: to trust, to protect, to choose. The result is a tapestry of arcs that interlock. Not everyone sheds who they are, but everyone learns how to fit together, and the film uses humor, tenderness, and a dash of chaos to let character growth feel like discovery rather than lecture. What makes the performances in this film so watchable is how each actor commits to the small, weird, and often hilarious truths of their characters, turning what could have been broad cartooning into quietly precise human moments that keep tugging at you. The young actor playing Lilo is a revelation of vivid specificity. She moves between mischief and pure, aching loneliness with a gaze so candid you can see her calculations and her heart at once, delivering lines with a blunt, comic timing that never undercuts the vulnerability underneath, which is crucial because her scenes often carry the emotional logic of the film. The actress who plays Nanny anchors everything with a lived-in fatigue that reads as both heroic and heartbreakingly ordinary, her performance full of micro-choices, a tired swallow before she answers, hands that keep rearranging a piece of clothing, a quick, shame-faced smile that says she's trying so hard to keep it together, that turn practical domestic moments into dramatic currency and make the sister bond believable rather than schematic. Then there's Stitch, whose performance is a study in how much personality can be conveyed without many words. The voice work, and performance capture if used, turns grunts and growls into a full conversational palette, while the physical animation follows through on those choices so that Stitch's curiosity, frustration, and eventual tenderness feel tactile. The comedy beats land because the creature seems to be discovering manners in real time, and the human actors play off that discovery instead of just reacting to it, which elevates every exchange. Supporting players bring texture rather than just jokes. The social worker is sketched with enough restraint to feel like a force of institutional reality rather than a villainous plot device, and small, carefully measured moments reveal his conflicts. Jumba and Pleakley get the loony, theatrical edges you'd expect, but the actors give them little heartbreaking asides, a regretful look, a misfired attempt at empathy, that deepen the laughs into something bittersweet. Even the antagonists, those from Stitch's origin, are performed with a pleasant willingness to be both imposing and ludicrous, which lets the film balance stakes and silliness without losing either. Physical comedy sequences, whether a kitchen disaster, a surfboard tussle, or a set-piece chase, are sold by choreography and by actors who throw themselves into pratfalls and timing with full conviction. You can see the rehearsal in the confidence of those beats, but also the spontaneity that makes them feel fresh. The quieter scenes are where casting truly pays off, a fragile confession at night, a lullaby scene where an entire relationship shifts on a look, the way breath and silence are used as punctuation. These are moments where actors resist performance for spectacle and instead live inside the scene, letting the camera catch the small collapses and recoveries. Sound design and editing also do a sly bit of acting on their own, cradling performances so that a single clipped line or a sustained stare has weight. Altogether, the ensemble behaves less like a collection of showy turns and more like a family learning how to play off one another. The result is a film where acting choices, big and minute, keep you smiling, worrying, and rooting for them at once. The director steers this film like a conductor who loves both brass and lullabies, shaping a tone that keeps you grinning one moment and quietly hovering over a character's heartbreak the next. From the first frames you can tell there's a clear creative point of view, one that refuses to let spectacle swallow intimacy and that insists the biggest emotional moments happen at kitchen table scale even when spaceships are involved. Visually, the direction favors contrasts. Wide, aloha-drenched vistas that remind you how small the people in the scene are, followed by tight, warm close-ups that make every breath and glance feel crucial. That choice of scale turns ordinary domestic spaces into stages for emotional drama, while the island's landscape becomes a silent character that reflects mood. Camera movement is used like punctuation. Nimble tracking and handheld energy during the film's chaotic set pieces sell the physical comedy and urgency, while long, steady pushes and restrained framings let tender exchanges breathe. The director knows when to let the frame hold on a moment so the actor's micro-expressions do the work, and when to cut fast to keep the comedic timing razor-sharp. Stylistically, there are recurring visual motifs, frames within frames, toys and domestic clutter that mirror the character's inner disarray, and repeated ocean imagery that underscores themes of longing and home, which give the film a cohesive visual grammar rather than a string of pretty shots. Sound and music are treated with similar finesse. Diegetic sounds, slamming doors, the creak of a surfboard, the clink of a plate, are woven into the score so that audio becomes emotional shorthand, and musical cues flip between playful and mournful to steer your feelings without ever spoon-feeding them. The director's blocking and staging deserve a mention because the film's most endearing beat, small acts of care and clumsy attempts at tenderness, only work if the actors are placed so those moments look inevitable rather than staged. Here direction leans into naturalistic movement and allows improvisational sparks, especially in scenes between the child, the sister, and the creature. So comedy and heart feel like two sides of the same coin. Pacing is another tool in the director's kit. The movie alternates brisk comedic sequences that build momentum with longer, quieter scenes that recalibrate the emotional stakes. This ebb and flow prevents fatigue and makes the big set pieces land harder because you've been given space to care. There's also a deft hand with spectacle. Action is choreographed to serve character rather than show off, so a chase becomes meaningful because it threatens a family unit, not merely because it looks cool. The director's narrative vision shows restraint too, resisting the temptation to over-explain backstory and instead trusting visual shorthand and performances to reveal inner lives. That confidence lets viewers fill in gaps and feel rewarded for paying attention. Even smaller choices, color grading that warms indoor scenes to suggest safety, the decision to favor practical effects in close interaction for tactile realism, a camera height that often matches a child's perspective, add up into a stylistic personality that's playful, humane, and precise. Overall, the director molds tone, rhythm, and imagery into a cohesive experience where comedy and pathos are not competing forces but collaborative ones, and where every technical choice seems calibrated to keep the audience laughing, worrying, and ultimately leaning closer. The cinematography in this film acts like a secret narrator, using angles, light, and framing to translate feelings into images so cleanly you barely notice the translation until it lands. Wide, breath-catching vistas establish the island as a living backdrop. Big skies, low-hung clouds, and shimmering shorelines that make the human figures feel both rooted and wonderfully small, while the camera drops into tight, intimate framings the moment the story needs your heart to lean in. Low-angle shots give Stitch an oddly sympathetic heft when he towers over a broken lamp, and high-angle views remind us how vulnerable the sisters are when paperwork and social services loom. Movement is choreographed to emotion. Handheld jittery tracking sells the chaos of kitchen disasters and surfboard tussles. Long, steady pushes let tender exchanges breathe, and quick whip pivots punctuate comedic beats so timing and camera act as partners. Lighting plays its part like an honest friend. Warm, practical interior light bathes the house in safety and texture. Soft key lighting on faces reveals the smallest hesitations. Golden hour exteriors turn ordinary moments into cinematic postcards, and cooler, sterile light marks the alien or institutional spaces so that the film's two worlds read visually as well as narratively. Framing choices are clever rather than flashy. Toys, doorways, and window frames are used to create smaller worlds inside larger ones, reinforcing themes of containment and belonging, and shallow depth of field is often used in emotional beats to gently isolate a face while the world behind it blurs into meaning. There are visually striking set pieces, an otherworldly crash landing rendered with dramatic silhouettes and debris caught in slow motion, a nighttime ocean sequence where backlight turns water into a constellation underfoot, and a sunlit hula scene where movement, long lenses, and rhythmic cutting almost make the camera dance with the actors. The cinematography also masters tension through geometry. Tight two-shots and tight lenses during confrontation scenes make the space feel claustrophobic, while wider compositions in the film's calmer stretches give room to breathe and to notice small, telling details. Textural choices matter too. Favoring practical effects and natural light in close interactions makes the creature feel tactile rather than cartoonish, and a camera height that frequently matches a child's eye line brings you into Lilo's world without patronizing it. Color contrast, warm homes against cool spacecraft interiors, keeps the eye and the emotion on a seesaw, and repeated visual motifs, receding doorways, frames within frames, the ocean horizon, create a visual grammar that ties scenes together. In short, the cinematography never upstages the story. It translates it, shaping atmosphere, heightening comedy and suspense, and making ordinary domestic life look as heroic and fragile as any space chase. The film's editing behaves like a heartbeat, sometimes a steady, comforting thump that lets you settle into a scene, other times a rapid drumroll that flings you into chaos, and that pulse is where much of its emotional engineering lives. Transitions are mostly invisible in the best way, built from classic continuity techniques, match on action, reaction cut-ins, and careful eye-line matches. So domestic moments feel fluid and lived in while the set pieces snap with precise, almost percussive timing. Comedy lands because the editor knows when to cut away and when to linger. A pratfall gets the quick chop that makes the gag read as surprise, then the camera holds on the stunned face long enough to let the laugh breathe into something a touch bittersweet. Action sequences use shorter, overlapping shots and rhythmic montage to increase momentum, but the editor resists the temptation to turn everything into frantic noise. There's spatial logic preserved. You always know where bodies and props are in relation to one another, so excitement is thrilling rather than confusing. Conversely, the film also opens space for long, patient beats where the cut is deliberately delayed, a single held frame on a character's expression, a slow push-in as a confession settles, or an uncut domestic tableau that allows performance nuance to accumulate. These choices give the audience pockets of empathy between the louder sequences. Structurally, the editing telegraphs emotional turns through parallel cutting, kinetic crosscuts between the island's everyday vulnerabilities and the cold, efficient world of Stitch's pursuers create tension by contrast and make the eventual collisions feel earned. Sound editing overlaps, clever use of L-cuts and J-cuts, blur the boundary between scene changes so music or a diegetic noise from the next sequence often starts before the picture switches, smoothing transitions and keeping the energy rolling. There are moments where the second act's exposition stretches a little. Some explanatory beats and connective montages that could have been tightened do slow the forward motion, but those lulls often function as emotional rests, allowing relationships to deepen. Whether they drag or brood depends on how much the viewer wants more plot versus more feeling. The rhythm of cutting also sculpts tone. Quick snappy edits lean into humor and chaos, longer assemblies invite solemnity and reflection, and the editor alternates these tempos like a DJ shifting genres so the audience never habituates. Micro-editing choices, an extra frame on a hand reaching, the removal of a spoken line for a silent close-up, frequently amplifies subtext, turning small, nearly invisible trims into big emotional returns. Even stylistic flourishes, a visual match cut that links two disparate spaces, or a slow dissolve to signal memory, are used sparingly so they feel meaningful rather than decorative. In short, the editing choreographs how you laugh, worry, and breathe with the characters, balancing momentum and stillness so that spectacle and intimacy both hit with satisfying clarity. The music in this film works like a secret character that nudges your feelings when dialogue won't, part island breeze, part spaceship hum, and it never lets the story's heartbeats go unloved or unmarked. At the center is a clever marriage of local Hawaiian textures, ukulele patterns, slack key guitar warmth, soft vocal harmonies that feel lived in rather than museum cute, with a broader, cinematic palette. Strings that swell just enough to make a kitchen table feel monumental, brass and percussive stabs that turn a pratfall into a punctuation mark, and electronic colors used sparingly to remind you there's an otherworldly origin under the surface. The composer threads distinct leitmotifs through the film so themes become emotional shorthand, a playful, syncopated motif for the creature that starts as jittery and atonal and gradually gains rounded intervals as he learns tenderness. A gentler, lullaby-inflected Ohana motif for the sisters that returns in different guises. Solo guitar, sparse piano, then full-string voicing, to map shifts in their relationship. And a chaser motif for the pursuers that is cold, mechanical, and rhythmically inflexible, which the score cleverly offsets by letting diegetic Hawaiian music, a luau drumbeat, a ukulele riff, interrupt spaceship cues and reclaim the scene. Timing is everything. Music slides under comedy with precise staccato hits and light brass flurries, then pulls back to let a single instrument, an alto flute or a plucked guitar, carry a tender moment so silence gains real power when it appears. The film uses spacious rests more often than bombast, which makes payoffs feel earned. Sound design and score are in dialogue rather than competition, with environmental sounds woven into the mix so that the swell of strings might begin under the surf's hush, or a synth pad may bloom from the whir of a spaceship engine. Those overlaps create seamless emotional transitions and stop the music from ever feeling like an obvious cue. There are standout passages that linger, the crash landing motif rendered with low brass and metallic percussion, a nocturnal theme for the house that uses sparse piano and distant vocal harmonies to make a room feel both safe and fragile, and a final sequence where motifs converge and are reharmonized so that what began as dissonance becomes warmth. Above all, the score trusts understatement. It enhances intimacy, heightens comedy, and gives spectacle emotional weight without stepping on it, using recurring motifs and careful silence to make the film sound like a family memory being written in real time. The film is quietly ambitious about what it wants to say, using a deceptively simple family story to explore weighty ideas about belonging, identity, and moral choice, so its themes arrive not as sermonizing lines but as lived consequences that ripple through character decisions and small, meaningful moments. At the center is the idea of family as a verb, not a static label. Ohana is taught, negotiated, defended, and sometimes threatened, and the film dramatizes how care can be an act of will as much as an emotional default. Linked to that is a persistent meditation on what it means to be a maid versus what it means to choose. Stitch's origin as engineered chaos sets up questions about nature, nurture, and agency. Can a being designed for destruction learn to prefer gentleness, and what responsibility do creators and caretakers bear when things go wrong? The movie also uses the outsider's perspective to examine grief and loneliness. The creature's literal displacement mirrors the character's emotional dislocation, and their mutual repair becomes a way to talk about how communities absorb loss and stitch new life into old wounds. Institutional tension, embodied by the social worker subplot and by the pursuers who see Stitch as property or threat, brings a political edge without turning the film into pamphleteering. It asks who gets to define normal, and how rules written for efficiency can break fragile lives if empathy isn't baked into application. Recurring motifs, domestic objects, the ocean horizon, songs and hula, anchor the metaphors so themes don't float free. Music and dance become methods of translation that let different beings understand one another when words fail. There's also a sly take on the ethics of spectacle. The film shows how adrenaline-fueled heroics can obscure quieter, harder labors of care and how media-ready moments rarely solve the underlying problems. In its quieter register, the movie nudges at broader cultural conversations, about belonging in a place with a layered history, about outsiders being welcomed without being erased, and about how love sometimes requires making choices that are painful but honest. The most thought-provoking ideas are simple. Belonging is earned as well as given, identity can be reprogrammed by relationships, and the smallest acts of attention often have more moral weight than dramatic rescues, and the film keeps returning to those small acts so the messages feel earned through scene-by-scene consequence rather than announced from on high. The visual effects and CGI in this film act less like showy fireworks and more like a patient toolkit whose main job is to make the impossible feel touchable. Close-up interactions lean heavily on practical methods, puppetry, partial props, and on-set lighting, to give the creature a physical presence that actors can really hold and play off, while digital work picks up the slack where scale, speed, or interplanetary spectacle are required. That division of labor shows in the best sequences. When Stitch reaches for a plate or curls under a blanket, you believe the weight, the tiny displacement of fabric, the way a fingertip might leave a faint smear, because the VFX team matched textures, subsurface scattering, and microshadows to the set lighting. Where the film opens up into widescreen mayhem, crash landings, chase sequences, airborne debris, CGI stretches into full choreography, with fluid sims for sand and water, believable particle effects for ash and dust, and detailed compositing to sell interaction between practical plates and digital elements. The creature's animation benefits from layered techniques. Performance capture or reference acting provides real-world timing and physicality, Animators add nuanced facial work and secondary motion. Groom artists tune fur behavior and wetness so it reads under wind and surf, and muscle rigs give the body believable momentum during pratfalls and tender gestures. Compositing and color grading do much of the invisible heavy lifting, matching grain, motion blur, and lens distortion so that a CG silhouette reads as if it was always in the frame, and practical touches, a bit of sand glued to a prop, a practical splash timed to an FX burst, make digital elements read as part of the same ecosystem. There are moments where wide, fully digital panoramas polish things a little too cleanly compared to the tactile immediacy of the house interiors, but those flashes are often forgiven because the close-up, hand-to-fur moments are rendered with such attention to contact and reflection that disbelief stays tucked away. Technical flourishes, real-time relighting on set, careful HDRI capture of sunset conditions, and subtle particle interactions when hair and water meet, keep the film's small-scale humanity anchored even when the story goes cosmic, and the sequences that linger in memory tend to be the tiny, practical digital overlaps. A paw pressing into sand, a spray of seawater catching the light, a reflection in an eye. Those micro-interactions are where the VFX either persuade you or remind you they're working. The sets and locations behave less like backgrounds and more like active storytellers, each surface and prop carrying a scrap of history that quietly explains who these people are and why they fight to stay together. Inside Nanny's house, every choice screams lived-in realism. Scuffed wooden floors, a refrigerator plastered with a child's crayon drawings and a crooked Polaroid of better days, a sagging couch patched with a throw, surf wax jars on a shelf, a ukulele with a missing string. These small details turn domestic clutter into emotional shorthand so that a single sticky note or a worn lei can say more about past loss and stubborn hope than an expository line ever could. The production design leans into texture, salt-scarred windowsills, flaking paint where humid air meets sun, the tactile grit of sand tucked into door cracks, and fabrics that bear the slow wear of real life. Color choices nudge feeling too. Warm ochres and sun-bleached turquoises in home interiors suggest comfort and resilience, while the ocean and beach palettes open the frame to longing and possibility. Public locations, the crowded market, the community hall where hula practice happens, the social work office with its laminated forms and institutional lighting, are dressed to expand the world's social dimensions. A bureaucrat's framed certificate and an over-organized file cabinet read as structural pressure, while a community center's mismatched chairs and taped-up flyers speak to improvised support systems. Contrast lives in the spaces. The alien craft and laboratory are designed with clinical geometry and cold metal panels, blinking consoles and sterile grates that make human rooms feel warm by comparison, and that visual opposition turns every domestic shot into its own kind of refuge. Props often do double duty as character clues, a battered lunchbox, a half-finished sewing project, a surfboard branded with initials, all of which subtly map motivations and memories. Practical design choices also feed performance and effects. Sets are built with removable walls, rigging points, and practical splashes so actors can physically engage with the creature and the digital work can marry seamlessly to on-set contact, making a paw-on-table moment credible in both touch and light. Location shooting, or meticulously dressed exteriors, gives the island its raw personality. Rocky tidipools, a palm-lined horizon, the particular way light slants at golden hour, so geography becomes metaphor. Thresholds and doorways frame choices, horizons suggest escape, and narrow alleys feel like pressure. Repeating motifs in set dressing, shelves tucked into drawers, a doorway repeatedly shot from the same angle, a particular poster on the wall, create visual echoes that bind scenes emotionally, turning everyday objects into anchors that the story keeps returning to as loyalties and stakes shift. Dialogue here works like a secret shorthand that tells you who these people are before they do anything dramatic. The child's lines are blunt, whimsical, and fearless, short sentences that land like paper planes and reveal a world full of unmet needs and stubborn hope, while the older sister speaks in practical, clipped cadences that carry exhaustion and fierce protectiveness. Those opposing rhythms create a live-wire chemistry in conversation so that even a small argument about chores sounds like a freighted negotiation over the family's future. The script favors economy over exposition. It trusts silence and an unfinished sentence to carry subtext, so when someone stops mid-complaint or simply hands over a plate, the camera and the actor do the rest, which makes the spoken moments feel earned rather than explanatory. Humor is embedded in specificity, not broad jokes but tiny observational asides, awkward non-sequiturs, and the creature's misunderstandings of human speech that flip tension into laughter. Those comic exchanges are rhythmically precise, the sort where a delayed response or a misread glance turns a line into a punchline and then into something tender. Emotional weight is kept in lean lines, a single weary vow, a quiet, stubborn promise, or a childlike demand for belonging functions as a full scene because the actors and the cutting let the words breathe. The script keeps returning to a few simple verbal anchors that evolve in meaning as relationships change, which is how the writing weaves theme into everyday talk without ever sounding didactic. Supporting dialogue does the heavy lifting of world building. Bureaucratic forms, sparing scientists speak, and local idioms are used not as info dumps but as character filters that reveal priorities and blind spots. The interplay between spoken language and non-verbal speech is especially clever. The creature's guttural noises and the human reactions are scored in such a way that the soundscape becomes a dialogue track of its own, filling in emotional beats where words don't reach. There are moments of deliciously sharp wit, offhand lines that land like darts, and quieter, memorable exchanges that stick because they are honest and specific rather than florid. Above all, the script respects its characters' voices. Each person gets a distinct verbal fingerprint, and when they collide the result is funny, painful, and unexpectedly humane, so the lines don't merely move the plot, they map the emotional terrain the film wants you to live in. Genre-wise, this film is a delicious genre salad that knows how to borrow the best utensils from each cuisine without making a mess. It wears family drama, buddy comedy, and sci-fi action like layered costumes that each get their moment to shine, and the clever part is how the movie keeps switching hats without feeling indecisive. It leans on familiar conventions, escape and pursuit beats, the misunderstood monster trope, custody-threatening social realism, but then quietly flips the script by making the emotional stakes domestic rather than apocalyptic. A chase through the sky matters because it could mean a signature on a form, not because the planet will explode, and that recalibration does two things at once. It preserves blockbuster energy while giving every stunt genuine human consequence. Humor comes from specificity and character mismatch rather than cheap gags. The creature's literal read on human rituals, the sisters' exhausted practicality, and bureaucratic absurdity are all mined for laughs that land because they reveal texture, not because they aim for a laugh track. On the action side, set pieces embrace kinetic choreography and spatial clarity, so thrills are readable and often funny. On the quieter end, the script allows pauses and micro-moments to breathe, which keeps the drama from being undercut by spectacle. The film also subverts a few clichés. Antagonists aren't simply evil, creators feel real remorse rather than cartoon villainy, and the monster learns humanity arc is treated as an ethical negotiation rather than an insta-conversion gag, so the emotional payoff feels earned. Tonal whiplash is a danger with this kind of blend, but stylistic consistency, recurrent motifs, a grounded production design, and a score that bridges island textures with cinematic swell, acts like glue, so the audience is carried from slapstick to heartbreak without being jerked off the rails. Some beats flirt with predictability, the custody threat, the training montage, but even those work because they're repurposed to highlight character choices rather than check genre boxes. Overall, the movie practices a kind of genre diplomacy. It negotiates between laughs and tears, between goofy chaos and intimate pain, and finds surprising harmony by always tethering spectacle to relationship. The film sneaks its social and cultural commentary into ordinary moments so that the big ideas rarely arrive as lectures and more often land as small, stubborn facts of life. A custody form on a kitchen table becomes a moral battleground, a hula practice doubles as cultural memory, and a broken lamp turns into an argument about value and care. At its clearest, the movie uses the outsider, a creature literally from elsewhere, as a mirror for displacement and belonging, which opens up conversation about migration, community, and who gets to claim home. The social worker subplot supplies a neat foil for institutional critique. Paperwork and procedures loom larger than context, and the film teases how policy that prizes efficiency can flatten complex human need. That's political without feeling like a manifesto when the tension is shown through scenes, a clinic waiting room, a stamped form, a frantic signature, rather than spelled out in expository speeches. On cultural representation, there's the double-edged element every island-set film must face. The movie can either treat local traditions as living practices embedded in daily life, language used naturally, music and dance as narrative tools, local faces and voices in creative roles, or it can reduce culture to colorful wallpaper. The difference shows in the little choices. Are chants and hula integral to character decisions, or are they background texture for a montage? Are elders and community members given agency, or are they props to certify authenticity? Where the film leans into consultation and layered depiction, cultural commentary reads as respectful amplification. Where it schemes, it flirts with tokenism. The sci-fi axis gives the film another political lever. Creators and corporate labs stand in for real-world debates about technological responsibility, militarization of research, and the ethics of making beings for convenience or warfare. By personifying the consequences through a creature who learns tenderness, the The story stages ethical questions as moral dilemmas rather than abstract debates, which makes them feel immediate rather than preachy. Environmental undertones also weave through the setting. Island geography, ocean horizons, and resource scarcity moments can gesture toward colonial histories and contemporary climate precarity if the script allows those metaphors to breathe instead of using them for scenic prettiness. Tactfully handled, the film's humor becomes a tool for critique. Silly bureaucrats, bungled enforcement, and media-ready spectacle all point to how society values image over slow care, but the same jokes can flatten complexity if they turn real hardship into punchlines. Handling sensitive issues like indigenous identity, grief, and economic precarity calls for nuance. Naturalistic dialogue, local casting, and scenes that privilege lived detail over tidy symbolism help the commentary land without feeling exploited. The film's choices about who speaks, who organizes the music and dance, and which community rituals are shown as ongoing practices rather than set dress decide whether its cultural voice is an empathetic chorus or a curated postcard, and those production decisions quietly determine whether the commentary feels earned, complicated, or merely decorative. The film hooks you not by grand proclamations but by a steady accumulation of moments that make you laugh, wince, and quietly wipe your eyes long after the credits roll, and that slow build is what gives its emotional resonance real staying power. Laughter often arrives from the perfectly timed collisions between chaotic physical comedy and tender domestic truth. A kitchen disaster that escalates into slapstick may have the whole audience laughing 1 second and then, because the aftermath reveals a fragile choice or a worried look, turning that laughter into a soft, invested silence the next, while tears come from small, unheralded beats rather than melodramatic speeches, a bedtime exchange, an exhausted sister's quiet promise, a simple song carrying the weight of memory, and those quieter scenes land because they are earned by the actors and framed to let feeling accumulate. Excitement and shock are delivered with clean spatial clarity, so a skybound chase or a sudden reveal actually jolts you instead of confusing you, and the contrast between spectacle and intimacy makes both feel more intense than if the movie had stuck to only one register. Audience reactions vary because the film offers multiple entry points. Children will respond to the creature's antics and visual gags, families will recognize the work of caregiving and the stakes of keeping a household together, and more reflective viewers will find moral and cultural threads to chew on, which means the film invites real discussion about belonging, responsibility, and how institutions measure value. Repeat viewings are rewarded because the filmmakers seeded motifs and micro-details into production design, dialogue, and sound so a reused line, a background prop, or a musical phrase picks up new meaning on a second watch, and the editing and scoring hide small pleasures that become more satisfying each time. The emotional architecture is designed to pull people in waves rather than slam doors, alternating buoyant sequences that build communal laughter with quieter stretches that encourage private reflection, and that rhythm makes the viewing experience feel communal in the theater and intimate at home. Viewers leave with images and questions rather than tidy answers, and those unresolved edges fuel conversations online and in person, prompting debates about character choices, cultural representation, and whether spectacle served the story or simply dazzled. In that sense, the film is lively company, the kind that keeps you thinking about a single gesture or line long after you've walked away, and it rewards both immediate emotional response and slower, deeper reflection. Think of this movie as sitting at an intersection where E.T.'s tender outsider friend story meets the Iron Giant's ethical debate about who we are when someone else designs us, but with a louder domestic drumbeat and island-specific textures that give it a different heartbeat. Compared with the original animated Lilo and Stitch, this version keeps the core myth, the misfit creature, the little girl who wants family, and the goofy ensemble of pursuers, but it shifts emphasis. Where the cartoon could revel in broad slapstick and visual invention, this Take Titan's focus on human stakes, trading some cartoony elasticity for tactile interactions and scenes that make custody forms and kitchen table decisions feel as urgent as any spaceship chase. Put another way, it borrows Spielbergian empathy for child-centered spectacle, the hiding, the secret friendship, the backyard as world motif, and bird-like moral seriousness about creation and choice, then layers on the specificity of place and culture so the film doesn't feel like a generic, kid plus monster riff but a particular story rooted in community rituals and domestic reality. In relation to other family-friendly hybrids, Paddington's warmth and physical comedy, or the way films like E.T. and the Iron Giant balance quiet, human beats with larger-scale threats, this film leans harder into the bureaucratic and relational consequences. Chases matter because they imperil a family's legal status, not just because they look spectacular. Stylistically, it also distances itself from franchise reboots that simply upscale effects. Instead, it favors close-contact practical effects and small, lived-in production design so that the creature's presence reads as believable in hand-to-fur moments, which tips the emotional register toward intimacy rather than spectacle for its own sake. Where some modern adaptations flatten cultural markers to appeal to global markets, this film uses local music, dance, and communal spaces as narrative tools, which sets it apart from comparable studio fare that treats culture as background color. If you map it against the director's likely influences, those who can marry set-piece clarity with quiet humanism, the film reads like an attempt to do both without losing either. Action choreography has spatial logic and emotional payoff, and quieter scenes get the same cinematic care. The result is familiar enough to carry genre comforts. Monster gets loved, authorities pursue, family defends, yet it introduces fresh weight by tethering spectacle to paperwork, invention to responsibility, and big visual set pieces to very small, very human consequences, so viewers who know the genre will recognize the lineage while still finding something recalibrated and specific to chew on. Symbols in this film work like invisible stitches, small, repeated touches that slowly sew the story's emotional fabric together so that every prop, color choice, and camera beat starts to feel like a deliberate line in a larger pattern. The ocean and the horizon recur as a twin metaphor for distance and possibility. Water represents both the vastness that separates characters, Stitch's literal exile, Lilo's emotional isolation, and the connective tide that eventually brings them together, so a gaze out to sea reads as longing while a shared shoreline becomes the border where belonging begins. The house is another quiet emblem, not merely shelter but a fragile archive of memory. Scuffed floors, a crooked photograph, a patched cushion all function as narrative fingerprints that tell you who lived here before loss and who is trying to hold it together now. So domestic clutter becomes proof of life and resistance against bureaucratic erasure. Names and naming appear as ritual acts of ownership and identity. Renaming the creature is an act of claiming that undoes designations like experiment and rewrites an origin story into something chosen. Conversely, forms and stamped paperwork act as a cold symbolic counterpoint, representing systems that quantify worth and threaten to unmake families with a single signature. Repeated visual motifs, doorways, frames within frames, and thresholds, work as tiny moral crossroads. Characters are often shot half in, half out of a frame during decisions, suggesting the liminal space where belonging is negotiated rather than granted. Costume and color operate like shorthand for feeling. Warm, sun-washed interiors and faded turquoises signal safety and cultural rootedness, while sterile metal and clinical lighting in the lab mark a world of control and removal, so every palette shift feels like an emotional relocation. Objects that seem incidental, a lei, a ukulele, a battered surfboard, become talismans, each carrying backstory and memory. Music and hula are not decorative but languages in their own right, recurring motifs that translate what words cannot, so dance sequences serve as dialogues and the soundtrack becomes a lexicon for belonging. Even small actions are symbolic. A repaired lamp, a stitched-up toy, the way sand clings to a shoe, those micro-repairs mirror the film's moral thesis that mending is a daily, hands-on work. Mirror images and reflections pop up to double identities, who we were versus who we choose to be, and the film's comedic set pieces often pivot into metaphor, chaos turned care, destructive instincts turned protective gestures, so slapstick gestures accrue ethical weight. In short, the movie layers metaphors like embroidery. None of the symbols are shouted, but together they create a quiet grammar that teaches you how to read its deeper meanings. Belonging is earned, identity can be rewritten by love, and small, repeated acts of care are the stitches that hold fragile families together. If this film is part of a franchise, it behaves like a careful sequel and a useful reset at the same time. It honors the original animated DNA, those themes of chosen family, misfit affection, and goofy alien physics, while widening the chassis so the story can carry new emotional weight and modern questions. Rather than simply retelling the same beats, this version expands the world building in ways that feed an overarching narrative. Creators get more screen time and motives. The galactic apparatus that once felt cartoonish is given institutional texture, and familial stakes, custody, economic precarity, community support, are pushed to the foreground so each action sequence or chase now has downstream consequences for characters across future installments. That means future entries can pick up threads, legal fights, Jumba's scientific guilt, Pleakley's cultural learning, or the ripple effects of Stitch choosing care over design, without having to rebuild the rules. Tonally it negotiates nostalgia and novelty. Small callbacks and motif reprises nod to longtime fans while new character layers and contemporary themes invite fresh audiences to stay. The film also recalibrates what canon might mean. Is this a straight reboot that replaces earlier continuity, a reimagining that sits beside the original, or a sequel that retrofits backstory? Each choice shapes the franchise map. Reboots open merchandising and accessibility, sequels reward deep fandom with payoff, and reimaginings create hybrid opportunities for spin-offs, origin stories, side character series, or even serialized TV that explores the Galactic Council. If the movie were treated as a historical film instead, the yardstick shifts. Accuracy and immersion would be measured by period detail, authentic dialects, and fidelity to archival facts. Production design, costumes, and the use of real locations would either transport viewers convincingly or expose anachronisms that pull them back out. In either mode, franchise entry or historical piece, the same fundamentals decide success. Does the film add meaningful layers to what came before? Does it make new narrative doors that future works can use? And does it respect the cultural and emotional ground it stands on? When it manages that, the film doesn't just sit inside a franchise or a time period. It becomes the hinge that future stories swing from, inviting sequels, prequels, and conversations that keep the world alive. When looking at the budget and box office performance of this film, there is more to uncover than just numbers. The budget often sets the foundation for what a filmmaker can achieve, but it does not always guarantee the final outcome. In this case, the amount spent on production becomes a fascinating lens through which to view the scale and ambition behind the project. Every set piece, location choice, visual effect, costume detail, and even the cast assembled reflect how the funds were allocated. Was it a modestly budgeted film that stretched every dollar to create something that felt far grander than its cost? Or was it a high-budget spectacle where no expense was spared to bring a director's vision to life? Sometimes a film surprises the industry by achieving remarkable visual quality and storytelling impact despite a relatively limited budget, showcasing creativity over sheer expenditure. Then comes the question of box office performance, a metric that has long been considered a benchmark of success or failure, though it does not always tell the full story. Some films enter theaters with massive marketing campaigns and sky-high expectations only to underperform, becoming cautionary tales for studios. Others start small, with modest promotion and limited screenings, yet slowly build momentum through word of mouth, critical praise, and loyal audiences who keep the movie alive far beyond its opening weekend. Marketing plays a key role here, often determining how wide the reach is before the first ticket is even sold. Was the promotion strategic, creating intrigue and anticipation? Or was it overly aggressive, setting unrealistic expectations that ultimately hurt audience reception? Financial success also depends on timing and competition. A film released alongside several blockbuster titles can struggle to gain the spotlight, even if it is well crafted. On the other hand, a strategically timed release during a quieter season can allow a movie to dominate the box office and gain attention it might not have received otherwise. Audience reception further shapes the trajectory, as positive buzz can extend a film's run, while negative reviews can cut it short despite a strong initial showing. In examining this film's journey from production to profit or loss, what stands out is how its financial story interacts with its creative one. A high budget often raises expectations for grandeur, spectacle, or innovation, and when these are delivered, the investment feels justified. But when a large budget leads to a lukewarm response, it becomes a study in over-reliance on scale over substance. Conversely, a film that thrives on a smaller budget with clever storytelling, innovative visuals, and strong performances often earns admiration for achieving more with less. This balance between spending and return is not just a business matter, but also shapes how audiences perceive the film. Whether a box office hit, a sleeper success, or a commercial disappointment, its financial journey adds another layer to its identity, influencing how it will be remembered in the years to come. If you are planning to experience this film, knowing where to watch it makes a huge difference in how much you enjoy it. Watching it in theaters is like stepping into the heart of the story itself, where the big screen and surround sound amplify every detail, making the visuals richer and the sound effects more immersive. This is the option for those who crave the full cinematic magic and want to feel every scene as though they are part of it. The theater atmosphere adds weight to every moment, especially if the film has breathtaking landscapes, powerful action sequences, or intense emotional beats that deserve to be felt on a grand scale. For those who prefer the comfort of home, streaming is often the next best thing. Many films today are released on popular platforms, allowing viewers to experience them on their own terms, whether late at night in bed or during a cozy family evening. Streaming provides flexibility, making it easier for people to pause, rewind, or revisit their favorite parts instantly. Some films are even released simultaneously in theaters and on streaming services, letting audiences choose the experience that suits them best. Digital rental or purchase is another avenue, perfect for those who like to own their movie moments or enjoy a one-time viewing without long-term commitments. This often comes with options like high definition or 4K, giving a theater-like quality at home for a fraction of the cost. For viewers on a budget, waiting for digital deals or discounted rentals is a smart choice, as prices can drop significantly after the initial release period. The best way to watch this film truly depends on the kind of impact you are looking for. If it is a visually stunning film with grand sound design and intense action, the big screen is unbeatable. But if the story is more intimate or dialogue-driven, streaming at home can offer a more personal and reflective viewing environment without the distractions of a crowd. It is also worth considering who you are watching with. Some films become memorable because of the shared experience, whether with friends, family, or a theater full of fans reacting together. Others feel more powerful in solitude, allowing you to fully absorb the story at your own pace. Timing plays a role too. Watching close to release means being part of the buzz and discussions happening everywhere, while waiting for its digital or streaming debut can save money and give you more control over the setting. No matter where you choose to watch, the experience will shape how the film stays with you afterward. Whether under the glow of cinema lights, in the comfort of your living room, or through a convenient digital rental, the choice is yours to create the kind of movie moment you will remember. If you enjoyed this video and would like us to provide reviews of every kind of movie, please remember to like, comment, share, and subscribe to our channel. Have a great day, and we'll see you in the next video. Goodbye.